part of NFIB's national effort in some of the key states across the nation, we formed a coalition called Small Businesses for Sensible Regulations. This is a coalition geared to reaching out to small business owners and finding out what regulations are hurting their businesses and preventing them from growing. Currently, there's over 330 regulations on the books, proposed regulations on the books under this current administration. Current regulations are $1.7 trillion, is what it costs the average business owner. Not the average business owner. Total cost per employee is $10,585 per employee with regulations that are currently on the books. We've invited Congressman Heck here today to talk a little bit about his experience going around the Valley in his district, speaking with constituents, business owners, to try to figure out how we can remove some of those regulations while maintaining the sensible ones that allow us to grow and be prosperous. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Congressman Heck, husband, father, doctor, colonel in the United States Army, and certainly a friend of small business owners.
All of you for taking the time to be here this afternoon, and thank NFIB for putting this together. One of the biggest issues that the Republican House has been dealing with is trying to scale back some of the onerous regulations that have been put in place over the last 3.5 to 4 years. And I think, as Adam stated, look, we all know that there needs to be regulation, but it's got to be reasonable. I mean, there needs to be regulation to protect consumers, protect the environment, protect employees, but we can't swing a pendulum from one side all the way to the other without stopping somewhere in the middle, and that's what's happening. Is we've gone to a period of really over-regulation throughout the executive branch. And I'll say, Adam gave some of the numbers. I can't remember them all. But the fact is, the Federal Register, which is where the federal government publishes all their proposed rules. So 2,987 final rules have been published in the Federal Register this year alone. Last week, 1,187 new pages were added to the Federal Register, now totaling 62,000 pages. Rules are considered economically significant if they cost more than $100 million a year to the economy. 40 such rules have already been published in 2012. 296 final rules that meet the broader definition of significant have been published, and 565 final rules affect small businesses have been put on the books just in 2012. So you can see that we are living under a period of increased scrutiny and increased regulation. Every one of those regulations, no matter how worthwhile, has an impact on the bottom line of a small business. And I'm going to tell you a couple of stories. We go out and visit a lot of businesses. So one of them is a cab company here in town. And so he hires somebody and participates in E-Verify, as he should. And so he runs the person through E-Verify, and they come up as somebody who may have something in their background that shouldn't allow them to be employed. So there's a time period where that individual can get that straightened out and still be employed. So he allows the guy to continue to work and says, go down to the Social Security office, get this straightened out. Well, over the next 2 to 3 days, the guy was just a lousy employee. So he terminated, not based on the E-Verify hit, but on the basis of his performance. The guy files, the terminated employee files a complaint stating that he was discriminated against on the basis of his immigration status. So, this employer now gets a request from the government agency involved in the investigation saying, you need to produce every W-9, every hire and fire that you have had for the last 2 years for one employee who was terminated because of poor performance. Those kinds of regulations, I mean, you can imagine the compliance, especially in the taxi cab industry, where there is a high rate of turnover in employees, to have to produce that much paperwork for an investigation because of one person. Probably the two biggest bills that we're concerned about, and I think everybody should be, regardless of business size, is the healthcare reform law and Dodd-Frank. Those are the two that are going to implement the greatest amount of burdensome regulations on small businesses. And again, small business owner, he's a restaurant chain here in town, has 5 outlets already, and is about to open his 6th, even in this down economy. The guy built a new facility and is about to open up his 6th outlet, putting about another 70 people on payroll. What does he face? Well, he provides health insurance to his employees, but his health insurance doesn't meet the requirements of the healthcare reform law for a basic benefits package. So he has 2 choices, because of course, even though will have 6 different outlets, one corporate umbrella, it's one business, so he really has would have about 250 employees. So he's the guy that he has to either change his health insurance package to meet the requirements, which will increase his costs, or he decides, I'm not going to provide that change, and then for every employee that leaves his health insurance and goes into the exchanges, he'll be fined $2,000, even though he provides health insurance. He provides it, but it doesn't meet the government requirement, so he'll be fined, taxed $2,000 a head. At 250 employees, I mean, he's looking at almost a $500,000 bill a year. Now, do you think he'd be opening up his sixth outlet if he knew that he was going to be paying $500,000 a year in a tax for health care insurance? Of course not. He wouldn't open that outlet, and that would be 70 more Nevadans out of work. These are the kinds of issues that we're struggling with. And you look at the health care law, and here's what's on the horizon. So there's a provision in the health, as you can imagine being a doctor, I kind of delved into the health care law to probably a greater degree than most people in Congress, and probably to a greater degree than I wish I did. There are 6 pages of law regarding one provision in the bill called accountable care organizations. 6 pages of law. When the Department of Health and Human Services issued the regulations concerning those 6 pages of law, it took 500 pages of regulations. 500 pages of regulations for 600 pages of law. That's 6 pages. So if you do the math, and if that's going to hold true, the health care bill is 2,700 pages. You're looking at 225,000 pages of regulations for the health care reform law. That's 3 times our IRS code. Okay, we all know how well that's working. So that's the problem. There's these unintended consequences associated with the bills that have passed, especially the big bills. Dodd-Frank, what happened? Anybody here trying to get a small business loan lately? I mean, it's dried up access to capital because banks are afraid to lend, because they're not sure what the requirements are going to be, because all the regulations haven't been put out. I've had folks, owners, that have a performing loan, and the banks are being told that they've got to cash it in because the property value is less than the loan amount, even though the loan is performing, because of the equity that's been built and the investors that are continuing to keep the loan up to date. They're being told, we're going to come and cash out the loan, because FDIC is telling us we got to cash it out because the loan is valued at more than your property, even though the loan's performing. We can't afford those kinds of things here in Southern Nevada. Those are the issues that we face. So what have we tried to do in the House? Well, obviously we've tried to repeal Obamacare several times. We were able to get one provision through, which was the repeal of the 1099 provision, which was certainly going to impact small business owners, having to provide a 1099 to everybody to whom you've got $600 worth of goods and services from. That would have been a huge, huge burden, financial burden. We were able to get that one through. Unfortunately, we haven't had much success getting anything else through, and where that's concerned. The other issues with Dodd-Frank are access to capital. We actually were able to pass a bill out of the House that would open up alternative pathways to trying to get capital, so that you could go out and raise venture capital without having to meet all the SEC guidelines of trying to get outside investment up to a certain amount, about $1 million. So you can go out and raise $1 million on the public sector side, getting investors, without having to worry about meeting SEC guidelines for doing that. It'd be very good for somebody like you, Mr. Sankey. And I've been to his shop and I've seen his windmills, and they are the only windmills that work. But somebody like himself who could go out and try to raise some venture capital without the overhead. We passed a bill called the REINS Act, which would require any significant regulation, which again defined as having an impact of $100 million or more in the economy, to actually come back to Congress to be approved before it's implemented. Because I'll tell you what I learned during my short time when I was in the state Senate. I had a bill passed, and one of my mentors, who happened to be the chair of the committee that this bill was passed, came to me and said, you better go to the hearing of the executive branch agency who's going to write the regulations about your bill. Because I guarantee you that when they try to write the regulations, they will twist whatever they want your bill to be into the regulations that they pass. And your bill would not have the effect that you thought. So since it was my first bill, I said, okay. So I went to the hearing where they were having the open hearing on my bill, to where they were going to write regulations, and they were correct. He was correct. They were taking the bill down a pathway it was never intended to go with the regulations that they were trying to implement. Now, I went incognito, so I was in the back of the room and nobody saw me, and about halfway through the meeting, I stood up and introduced myself as the author of the bill and directed the agency that that was not the direction that the bill was intended to go. But you can't do that, I mean, to every bill. So that's why the same idea in Congress is if you're going to pass a significant bill that's going to impact our economy, it should be the elected officials that are making the determination as to whether or not that regulation should go into place, not unaccountable government employees who really are looking at their job security by generating reams and reams of paperwork like OSHA. How many people have had issues with OSHA? I mean, OSHA is fines. Their budget is based on the revenue that they generate based on fines. So what do you, I mean, their incentive is to find something wrong with your business. Their incentive is not to come and help you remediate your issue. It's to find it and fine you, because that's how they stay in business. Those are the kinds of things that we need to address. And what we hope to do as we maintain the Republican majority in the House, pick up the Republican majority in the Senate, and hopefully change the White House to a Republican occupant. Because it's clear from everything that you've seen and heard that there are two very different visions for the future of our nation, especially where it comes to small business. I was a small business owner as well before getting elected to Congress. I had a separate business for my medical job, a consulting firm. And everybody who's been a consultant knows that in down economies, the first thing to get cut are the consultants. And so it was real hard keeping my doors open, keeping my employees on the payroll, making their benefits, going without a paycheck so they can get their paycheck. I've been there. I know what it's like. So has Mitt Romney. And that's why we need somebody who's going to be able to understand what it's like to sign the front of the check, not just the back of the check. And too many people in Washington are only good at signing the back of the check. So with your support, we'll be able to make those changes. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk a little bit about what I've seen. And we've got great businesses in District 3, not just Mr. Stanky, but you never know what's out there until you actually run for office. I found we have Varian Medical Systems, one of the foremost research and development companies in medical radioisotopes, located in Henderson. Incredible work that they're doing. We have Vedatech, a high-tech industry that builds high-tech circuit boards for Department of Defense applications, located right here in Henderson. Just found out we've got Nevada's only distillery right here. Now I'm going to be there at your party November 17th. Got that up down there. But that's the thing, is that we have so many incredible opportunities here in our state that unfortunately I don't think get the notoriety that they deserve. Because if we're trying to attract more high-end, let's say, IT investment, well, maybe it'd be good to know that we've got the Switch Super now, located here, or that we've got a company like Vedatech making circuit boards, or we've got other IT businesses here that are already here and doing well. That's the greatest commercial, to get similar businesses to want to come here on top of our favorite tax climate here in our state. But those are the kinds of things that we need to push. And with your help, those are the kinds of things that we will be able to push. Hopefully you're members or will be members of NFIB. And they didn't ask me to do a pitch, but I feel obligated. And certainly, we need for you to become members of the coalition, the Small Business Coalition, because that's where your voices are heard. And that's important for us back in Washington to actually understand what's going on in the districts and in the businesses within our districts as we try to generate legislation that will help, not hinder, the growth of businesses, and that we keep an eye on the regulations that are holding you back. So again, thanks Adam, thanks Julie, and thank all of you for being here.